Can I thank the Honourable Member for Doncaster Eton Isles of Axholme? He honours John today by securing this debate, and actually all members who have spoke honour their respective people that they held so dear in the most powerful way possible by turning personal grief into public purpose. And so I thank them all for giving their time to speak here today. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there was a TikTok video that went viral. It opens with a young, energetic and innocently woman asking, be honest, who do you call whenever you're at your lowest? Who's that one person? And the stitched video replies come in with men answering, and it's harrowing and insightful. Nobody. I'm a man. No one cares. Not a single soul. Nobody. No one, because I'm all alone. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I don't call anyone. Nobody. I'm a guy. No one gives a Speaking for the guys, literally no one. You all call someone? There's no one. Nobody cares. No one. I'm a man. No one cares. Not a single person. I wouldn't turn to a single person on this earth as they will use it against me. I wouldn't call anyone. What? We can call somebody? This small insight, this seemingly jokey platform hits on what we, this House and wider society, must look at to try to understand. Why do men feel they're not valued? Why do they feel they cannot ask someone? Why do they fear it will be used against them? And why do they fear they can't ask for help? Many hide in plain sight, struggling, battling, until it's too late. After all, we know from the Samaritans that about 2/3 of suicide victims are not known to mental health services. Now, you may be wondering why I'm choosing to focus my comments on men, when we know that the latest ONS data shows that suicide rates are at their highest level since 1999. But as we've heard, men account for 3/4 of all suicides in the UK, and the latest paper by the Centre for Policy Research on Men and Boys puts this in stark light. More men under 50 die in the UK due to suicide than any other reason. 14 men every day die by suicide in the UK. 74% of all suicides are male. 3 times as many men die by suicide every year than die in a vehicle accident. And over 90,000 men by 2023 in England and Wales have died by suicide this century. That's enough to fill Wembley Stadium. Now, there's so much to do in this area, and I do want to highlight the focus and pressure that the last government made in this area. Through the NHS long-term plan, an additional 57 million was provided by the former Conservative government between 2019-20 and 2023-24 to fund suicide prevention and bereavement services in every local authority. And my former colleague, Sajid Javid, touched tragically by the experience of losing his own brother to suicide, was instrumental in starting the development of the suicide prevention strategy, which was published in 2023. Now, key initiatives included the development of a new nationwide near real-time suspected suicide surveillance system, which aimed to provide early detection and timely action to address changes in suicide rates. In its entirety, the strategy set out over 100 actions across government departments, the NHS, the voluntary sector and national partners to make progress. In 2021, the previous government also announced 150 million of funding for crisis mental health facilities and patient safety in mental health units. And in January 2023, it was announced £7 million of funding would be allocated to new mental health ambulances. 143 million would go towards 150 new projects, including schemes providing alternatives to A&E. This is welcome, but the stats show, even with all this focus, the trend is worsening. With all of this work and prioritisation of funding, we are yet to hear anything substantial from this government about what they are doing on suicide prevention. And as we know from one example, training can make a difference. The Samaritans report that their rail team, for every 1 life lost, it's estimated that there are 6 lives saved by interventions made thanks to the training given to National Rail and rail operating staff. Proof things can be done. Now, just yesterday, was World Suicide Prevention Day, and the Prime Minister was asked twice about this topic. And in response, he said, firstly, may I also thank those dealing with suicide prevention. Probably everyone in this House knows someone who's taken their life. It touches all of us, and we must do everything we can together to prevent suicide. And secondly, I think that suicide prevention matters to everybody in this House. I will reaffirm our commitment. I will work across the House with all members to deal with this suicide prevention. These are positive, warm words from the Prime Minister, which we are all obviously pleased to hear. However, I think across this House and in the public, we'd be interested in hearing the tangible actions taken by this government after 1 year in office. Therefore, could I ask the Minister if he could provide an update on what practical steps this government is taking directly on suicide prevention, including the implementation of the recommendations in the strategy, and what points are being addressed? For example, disparities in the difference across ethnicities and races in UK. Now, I know the government has been consulting on a wide range of issues, particularly when it comes to men's health and the men's health strategy. Now, I have personally been shining a light on these issues since I was elected in 2019, so I'd like to thank the government personally for taking this important step forward. I understand the government is due to publish the mental health strategy, something I commend them for, and I note that in an adjournment debate earlier this year, the Minister stated, in November, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, brought together leading campaigners, experts and the Premier League to gather ideas and information to inform our strategy and our 10-year health plan. We take suicide prevention extremely seriously because every suicide is a tragedy that has a devastating and enduring impact on families, friends and communities. His Majesty's opposition welcomed this step forward, but taking a look at mentions in the 10-year plan, I note just suicide is mentioned only 3 times. I think all of us here today hope to see this feature heavily in the upcoming men's health strategy. Therefore, can the Minister provide an update on timescales for this strategy? And how will this strategy consider suicide prevention? Now, will the government also look at the prospect of a Minister for men's and boys if the evidence points in that direction? We currently have a Minister for women, as we believe that women have different problems across society. But by that very logic, men and boys have different needs too. Therefore, if we're going to go down the route of segregating policies on sex, there would appear to be a compelling argument to have a men's minister to work across departments. This can't be starker. For every woman who dies by suicide in the UK, 3 men die. Another achievement by the last government was the launch of the Suicide Prevention Grant Fund, as we heard, providing £10 million to 79 organisations between August 2023 and March 2025. In my own constituency, the charity First Step Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland received £76,845 from the grant. The grant was used to improve specialist counselling work in prisons and building on pilot projects. For that reason, it is a regret that the Suicide Prevention Grant has come to an end in March 2025 and has not yet been renewed or replaced. Now, in response to a written question in April, the Minister stated there are currently no plans to run another grant fund. So can the Minister explain the basis behind the decision not to renew or replace the Suicide Prevention Grant Fund earlier this year? And what alternative provision, if any, is being provided?
I thank the Shadow Minister for his comments, and of course we all want to work together to achieve the best outcome, there is no question. But can I remind the Shadow Minister that the 10 million voluntary services grant was a one-off grant and that the last government failed to renew the funding for local authorities prevention work, the 57.1 million that was mentioned?
I'm very grateful. At this point, I'd like to thank her for all the work she does with the APPG on this point. But actually, it's looking at the holistic part of what we're trying to do in this space. So I've already outlined all the funding that the previous government put in, and I'm going to come on to some of the other problems because she will also know the likes of the national insurance raise that has gone in place will have a devastating impact, of which I'd like to come on to here. Now, at the time, the Minister also stated that we will evaluate the impact of the fund and the services that have been provided by the grant funding organisations. Learning from this evaluation will help to inform the government's mission to reduce the lives lost to suicide. So could the Minister provide further details on this evaluation, when it will be completed and whether the government will reconsider its decision to end the grant funding, if the results show that it's had a positive impact on supporting suicide prevention. Charities were not exempt in the budget from the increase in employers' national insurance contributions. This has significantly hampered their financial situation. You just have to listen to what the Samaritans have said in response to the spending review last year. The reality is that funding for suicide prevention has dwindled down to next to nothing. To deliver our life-saving work, charities are reliant on donations, on the generosity of the public, and this is even more precarious at a time when many people across the country are facing economic hardship. Chair, I point this out not to score political points, but to draw attention to the fact that the Labour government needs to set a direction and a plan to deal with the leading killer of men and women under the age of 30. In closing, Chair, I want to recognise that yesterday was World Suicide Prevention. Every year, 720,000 people across the world take their own lives, and the theme of this year's Worldwide was changing the narrative on suicide. It calls on us to challenge harmful myths, reduce stigma, and foster open, compassionate conversations about suicide. Which leads me to where I started. If men don't know their value, if they don't know they have someone to confide in, if they don't truly believe we care, we aren't going to break the cycle, we aren't going to make a difference, and we aren't going to ultimately save lives. This is the challenge laid before society, this House, and ultimately this government.